Hi everyone. I'm here to talk to you about what we did in Rudder since last CfgMgmtCamp last year, and well, actually it's last year, and what is the roadmap for this year? So what's happening? So, yeah, we had a very busy year. 2017 brought a lot of features in Rudder. Where we are at the moment, we have 4.1 version, which is the current extended support release. It means that's a version that will be supported about 18 months. Current latest version is a 4.2. This version will be supported for 3 months until the release of 4.3. The 4.3 is about to arrive. We just released a beta version, and it will be one of the biggest release of Rudder in terms of features. It's very massive, as you will see. So the big change in Rudder in 2017 is now we have a Windows PowerShell DSC agent. So based on PowerShell desired state configuration framework. So we have a native Windows agent to manage Windows. It uses Microsoft PowerShell DSC, and it needs PowerShell 4 or more. So it means you can use it on Windows 7 and more, or Windows Server 2008 and more. So we'll need to proper patch to get to PowerShell 4, but it will work. So as a side effect, we needed to change our generic method. So now we have generic method for the classic agent, so the CfgEngine1 historical, and the DSC agent on PowerShell for Windows. And same for techniques, we now have the technique version for CfEngine and for DSC. It was a lot of work, and that's mainly the big feature of the 4.2. The 4.3 brings a lot of interesting features for all those that has been using Rudder and CfEngine since a long time. The main one is now directives are not merged anymore. So for those who've been using Rudder before, when we generate policies, we merge all the directives based on the same technique in the same file, resulting in a very big file, which is kind of hard to read back if you want to understand what's happening as a human. Now we will generate one file per directive, which means that you will be able to have several versions of the same technique on the same node, which was impossibility before, and we can mix enforce mode and audit mode. So now we have lifted all the technical issue we had before for mixing everything and starting to deploy different things on different systems. So here in this example, on a given node, I've applied the manage key value in file directive, one in audit mode and one in enforce mode on the same node. It generates effectively 2 folders, one per directive. Technically, how it works, we had to modify our techniques to support this system. We have a tag which is Rudder unique ID. It's a placeholder in the code, so in the bundle name, in the class name, in the function names, and it allows to avoid duplication of names, so no collision, and it works like that. We have also hooks that are now in techniques. So now we have also a new system, which is a hook, which is something that can be done once before all the techniques are run, or once after all the techniques are run. Before it was not necessary, it was within the technique that we did that. Now we have to export this feature so that for instance, we check only once all the PGP keys of repository rather than once per directive. It's kind of technical, I'm sorry. Next one, now we have techniques parameters in the technique editor. So for those who don't know, we have a technique editor within Rudder. It allows you to create your own techniques based on building blocks. Like for instance, in this technique, that we created, we ensure that we have a package SNMP installed. We will edit the file SNMPD and restart this service if the file has been edited, and make sure that the service is running in any case. And what's new now, we have parameters, which is monitoring servers. And this parameter will be exposed to the end user creating the directives. So on the directive screen now, for this technique, we will be able to set up the monitoring server. So in the directive, based on the technique we created, we can have parameters now. It allows to properly share your code and reuse it more efficiently. This is something that we've shown already last year, but it wasn't completely released, so I'm showing it again. Now we have JSON everywhere, and especially for node properties. We can attach properties to node within Rudder, so either in the web interface directly, and it's JSON standard values, and we can access them in the directive fields, so the node properties and the name of the property. So for instance, here it will be the full JSON ID, fra1, name, colo1, Paris, location, Paris, etc. Or simply a field in this JSON or value. So the data center ID will be fra1 in this example. We can have default value. If the property is not there, it will be replaced by a default value like UK2, or for the NetBIOS name, if we don't have a property to set up the NetBIOS name, it will be the host name, etc., etc. What's new is we have a plugin to automatically import this node property from external data. So you can have a REST API somewhere that will expose information for Rudder, and Rudder will come and query this REST API to get properties for your nodes. It's a specific type of property, so it will show up as a property set up by data source in the web interface. This is configurable via the plugin. It allows you to define the REST API, so where you want to call it. You can put node name, node ID, some parameters inside the call to get specific data. And you can query part of the JSON path. The only constraint is that this REST API returns JSON, valid JSON, and that it will be parsed by Rudder. It can be global parameters, so the same parameter for all the nodes, or specific parameters per node. We can also put headers or some values in the code. We can extract specific data from JSON using parameters again, so we can drill down in the send JSON, like the host name of the machine, the monitoring IP of this machine. We can define how often we want to update this data, so never once every 5 minutes or 10 minutes every day, when we regenerate policies, when a new node is accepted, etc., etc. And if the API or the REST API stop answering, what do we do? Do we erase all the data? Do we keep the data we had? Or do we put a default value? So all these node properties allows you to drive the directive, so the configuration of the system. And you can also override these properties on the node itself. In the folder var rudder local properties.d, you can put JSON file that will add more properties on the system, and they will override Rudder properties if any of them are defined. For instance, on the server side, we define some configuration for the kernel for PostgreSQL, but on this specific server, we know that we need something else, so we can override it locally. And as a result, it will be the kernel shmx with the local configuration. It overrides on the first level, so it means that we don't keep the other kernel shmall value, we only keep the first level, so the keys. If we want to go to the second level, we have generic method. So we can define JSONs from generic method, variable dict or variable dict from files. As the name implies, you define a JSON file, it reads it, and define variable. And then you can merge your variables with variable dict merge that will take two JSON and merge them. If any of the two JSON doesn't exist, it will fail, and so the variable will not be defined. And we have the merge tolerant, which means that if one of them doesn't exist, then it will do a best effort and return the one that exists. And it will not fail. So this allows to do pretty neat things with properties and evolve your configuration from, drive the configuration from external data, external CMDB, or etc. We have tags on directive and rules. This should be a GIF, animated GIF, that should show the directive trace with all the directives, and we type file, and it shows all the directives which contain files in them or in the description, and then we have the tag we define for the environment production, and it filters out all those for environment production. But yeah, okay, technical issue. We have a new API for the relay. As a reminder, we have relays on Rudder that allows you to cross networks, like you have your Rudder server, some nodes, and some nodes that are in another network or in too far away, and you don't want to have every node communicating over the continents to the Rudder server. So we have relays, and now we have API on these relays that allows you to trigger a run on a specific node that is behind the relay, so you can cross networks with this, so you can trigger an execution now of this agent, make sure that it's running now, and get back the result on the Rudder server. And you can share data or files between nodes. So let's say you have the node 1, which have a file /var share SQL something, and you want to share it to another node, which is behind another relay. You have two generic methods, share file to node and share file from node. It will automatically detect what's the path to the other file, and it will upload the file from the node to the relay API. The relay API will upload it to the central server. The relay will fetch it and make it available for node 2. So you don't need to be in the same network now to share files between nodes. It's not as efficient as gossips or etc., but it's good. We also have hooks now since 4.1 on Rudder. So it's hooks on events on the Rudder server. So when you accept a node, when you delete a node, when you have a policy generation that starts, that stops, that when you check policy for a specific node, etc. So these are scripts that are put in opt rudder etc hooks.d. They will be run automatically when the event happens, and it allows you to customize what's happening effectively on Rudder on each of these events. For example, when you delete a node, you want to remove it from some CMDB, or the way around. When you accept a node, you want to provision it somewhere else, etc. In 4.3, you can extend your inventory as well. We use Fusion Inventory for inventory. It's pretty extensive, so you get a lot of information about what's on the system, but sometimes you want more information, something that is not reported by the inventory, or some custom data that it's clearly not generic. So you can extend the inventory by putting hooks in the var rudder hooks.d or the Rudder program file rudder hooks.d. This is scripts that needs to be executable, runnable by root or current user, and not word writable. That's the security we put on that. We put there. It must return a valid JSON file, and the JSON file will augment the inventory sent to the Rudder server. these properties will be available in the node property. You can query it, you can make groups based on this property, you can report it on the API or use it in the policies. I will talk later about performance and how we scaled Rudder to 10K nodes, but a bit, some words there. In 4.1, we made a lot of work about performance, especially in the web interface. So now we have every resources which are cached, everything that is compressed, which makes the UI much faster, especially if you don't have a very fast network. The agent is much faster. We patched the agent to improve the variable lookup, etc. expansion, so it's much faster. In normal usage, nearly twice as fast as before. In some very bad case, 20 times faster. And the policy generation is a little bit faster as well, so it makes the life a bit easier. In 4.3, we have a lighter agent as well. We used to ship our own version of Perl with the agent. We stopped. It was time. We support Cmdb. On the CLI output, we have all timing information, so we know what is slow and what is taking time when we run the agent. And we dropped the old CfgMgm protocol for the new CfgMgm protocol. Again, it was time to do that. I think we were one of the last using the old protocol anyway.
Still more.
Okay.
Nothing ever died.
In 4.3, we have some other features. We can make groups of groups. So now you can define a group by nodes being in another group. Yeah, I know you love that. We have node lifecycle also. We can define the lifecycle of each node. It will have an impact on the compliance. So some lifecycle will completely disable the compliance or ignore the no reports. You can create groups based on that, so customize the behavior of the policy as well based on the lifecycle. We renamed the NCF generic method to have more consistent name, so no more actions and stuff like that. And we have a tool that automatically migrates all existing code so that it doesn't break your installation when you will upgrade to 4.3. And also, we have exactly the same version for Rudder and for NCF. So we used to have a different versioning for both, and it was too complex to maintain and to use in the long term. So now the latest version of NCF is the 4.3. We have many plugins. Some are finished and some are in the way, on the way. The first one is a branding plugin so that we can customize the web interface, the login page, the logo, the colors, some text in the banner, etc. So yeah, so that you can see exactly on which environment you are or use your company logo, etc. We have also a plugin for very precise ACLs on API. So now we can define ACLs, rules and authorization per token or per user, and each user has now a token attached to it. The token have an expiration date. User can also have read-only or read-write token. And you can map the permission of users to tokens, the permission of tokens to users. What do we define actually? It's an ACL path. So it's segments separated by slashes, which are effectively the path of the API. So /API, /node, /something. Each segment can be either a string, so API, node, rules, compliance, etc. Can be a star, so it matches anything within a segment, or a double star, which match anything at the end of the rules. You have HTTP actions, so get, push, put, post, and delete. And if something is not authorized, it means that it's denied. So for example, if we allow API nodes ** get, we can do anything on the nodes API. We can read it. We can see all the nodes inventory of specific nodes, the pending nodes, but we cannot modify anything. We cannot accept a node. We cannot delete a node. We cannot change nodes property. If we allow simply API nodes and get, we can simply list nodes and do search on the list of nodes, so like the groups query. But we cannot see the pending nodes because it will need to be API nodes pending, and since we don't have wildcard at the end, it fails. We can allow to change a specific directive, so we put the ID of the directive and we allow post, and we only allow that. For instance, if you want to make a self-service portal where somebody could set a value for something and make sure that this is not abused in some way to edit something else, you make a token for this self-service portal to access only a specific directive, and it won't be able to touch anything else. We can also allow simply to check every directive but not do any modification in them. We have also plugins for monitoring. We are working with Centreon, which is a French monitoring system open source, to work together to configure automatically monitoring within Centreon. So when a new node appears in Rudder, it will automatically subscribe the node within Centreon. So it will know that the node needs to be monitored. And then we will configure the node with Rudder, and it will automatically configure the host template, which is a configuration template for monitoring within Centreon. So when you will configure a new service, it will automatically put this service within Centreon to make sure that it's monitored, and you will know if it's up and running. We have kind of the same with iTop, which is an open source CMDB, which is very cool. We can export the inventory in iTop. We can import properties or data from iTop to Rudder, and we export back the compliance of every service within iTop so that we know the dependencies of conflict or issues or compliance issues within iTop, and if it's an issue or not, if it's this non-compliance has a real impact, or if it's something we can live with it. We have a plugin for reporting over a period of time. It's in development progress, so it's not the definitive graph that will be, but the idea is here you have each day of the month, and we see the compliance over time, so all the success, all the failure, all the unknown, pending, etc. So it's configurable either by rule, by group, by nodes. You can define exactly what you want to do, to display, which type of compliance you want to have, if it's average or not. Okay, I thought I had an extra slide. It's still in progress, but it will allow you to see what's been going on in the past time, and for each of the non-compliance, what was exactly the non-compliance, and you will be able to dig into details. So that's all for the features, but we've been working also to improve, to be more open, and so that people understand why we are working on specific bugs and not. And now we have a clear classification system for bugs on the bug tracker. So this is the new bug tracker interface, well, new since 5-6 months, so it's not so new anymore. But we have plenty of criteria, so you can define if it's a bug, something, the subject, the template, so you fill the bug and give all the details. And then we have a lot of things we can fill, and there are 3 new fields that are very new, which are user visibility, effort requires, and severity. User visibility means in which use case a user will have this issue. Is it the first impression? So even before installing Rudder, it will be an issue for somebody, like there is no support for a specific platform, Rudder doesn't do something that is needed, or etc. If it's when you install Rudder, if it's when you you do something simple, something more complex if it's operational, so more like day-to-day. Or infrequent is when you have very complex installation, yeah, like you. When you integrate with third-party system, etc. Then we have the severity, which is the impact of the issue. If it's critical, if you lose data, if it's a security issue, if it breaks Rudder, if there is no workaround, then it's critical. Then if you have no easy workaround, it's major, and all go down to trivial, which is, okay, it's a typo somewhere, or we can live with it, but it would be better if we had it. And finally, we have the effort required. The effort required is small, it can be done in a couple of hours, or very large, we don't know. We need to make several meetings with several people, several developers or sysadmins to know exactly what's the issue and how we will fix it. So it's from several hours to several months, basically.
Do you expect us to do an initial estimation of it, or is it just for information what we have chosen?
You can fill it if you are pretty confident, but we will change it afterward when we review the tickets. Every new tickets are reviewed every Monday afternoon. So all the tickets of the weeks are reviewed on Monday afternoon, and we will fill these 3 entries, changing possibly what the user has been filling. And it computes automatically a priority based on that. From 0, which is, okay, it shouldn't even be there, to more than 150, it's everything broken, we will need to fix that. It's based on the user visibility, and it's based on the criticality. So if it's critical and first impression, then you know it will be very high priority. And if it's a very large issue, like it needs months, we will put a slightly lower priority than if it's easy to do. We have a bias towards small issues because they are easier to fix, and so we can push them away. Here it's last week top priority issues. So one was Rudder agent does not install in CentOS 5 with 156. So you see it's a pretty big issue. Actually it was fixed, but the reporter didn't confirm that it was fixed. Dynamic grouped, not reload after importing archive. We could never reproduce it, but still the priority stayed high. And wandering inventory if curl is not installed, which is not a big issue, but it's visible. And some documentation issue, we don't really explain. Somehow we broke the doc, and we are missing the last step of the installation in the documentation. We have a new FAQ. I will go fast on that. And in the future, we will also have a very busy year this year. We will completely update the client-server communication system. We will have a 2-step policy update. So it means that when we will generate new policies, the client will fetch the new policies that have been defined in another folder, check this policy, and if they are valid, apply them. It will allow better consistency on what has been downloaded. So if something breaks during download, we will detect it, and it will ease the burden on the server for policy validation. There won't be any policy validation on the server, so the policy generation will be much, much, much faster. It will scale. We will drop syslog. We send back all the reports to the Rudder server via syslog. We will replace it by some HTTPS file upload, which would be much better, especially, I will talk to that in the next talk, so I don't go down on that. We will be able to customize dashboard, customize the column in tables, improve the group page, and manage the user within the web interface. That's the plan for this year. And we have a lot of ideas of plugins, mainly synchronize data between Rudder servers, or back, so advanced access control for everything, high availability for Rudder servers, and ramp up the deployment, so canary testing, deploying only a subset of system, and if it doesn't work, roll back, etc. We will announce a new program, the Rudder Ambassador, so it will be for exceptional Rudder contributors. It will be a way to thank them and show them as great person. We have a new domain name, which is rudder.io, and we will do all our branding around Rudder. And that's all. And I'm right on time. Yeah. Do you have any questions? It's been pretty fast. I'm sorry, I've put too much information, but if you have questions, it's the right time. Yes, Florian?
In the reporting module, have you thought about being able to correlate, like if there is a drop to underarm with the audit log, and check if, let's say, if there is a big change in the reporting, could you find out from there which policy change it was?
We will have a full report also on which policy were applied at this moment, so we will know what was the policy at any point, so before and after the change, if there is a change. So we will be able to say that at this moment we changed the policy and it broke or it improved, which can be also the case. I didn't speak about it, but also in 2017, there's been a Forrester review of all config management software. We've been pretty busy with that. We can't talk really about the results, but look online at the results. Most of the tools are there. It's great. Thank you.